Elephant in the room probably is, what the fuck is this guy doing on the stage? I get it. I understand that. I see people looking at their itinerary, making sure they're in the right room. You are, I guess. After all, I am best known to the public for portraying a dope-shooting, coke-snorting, whore-mongering, wife-beating, murderous psychopath. So if you're a little thrown, I understand. I'm not an expert on compassion, nor have I ever played one on TV. So why the hell am I here? But the answer to that question is really, in essence, what I'll be talking about today, and it's really my own personal spiritual journey, however gooey and treacly that may sound. I'm also here because David Rand asked me to, and he happens to be one of my favorite people on the planet. He's someone I admire very much and always very humbled by the work he does and how he does it with such grace and humility all the time. And yes. So I don't like to say no to David. And David and I know each other through the Tibetan Buddhist world, which is the world that my journey has led me to. So today I'm here as an actor who's also a practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism, which is a path where compassion is of central importance. But let me back things up a bit. I was raised Catholic in New York City. I never took too much interest in it, except for the movies like King of Kings and The Greatest Story Ever Told. I love those. But in my late teens, I was first exposed to Buddhism through my love of Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and the Beats. I remember picking up a copy of the Diamond Sutra at St. Mark's Bookshop in the East Village, and I carried it around with me for about 2 weeks, but more like a talisman than anything else because I found the words pretty impenetrable. But the essence and the flavor of Buddhism really appealed to me. Peace, love, nonviolence, that made sense to me. But at the tender age of 19, they really remained in my psyche just as that, concepts and ideas, however lovely they were. And besides, I was far too busy pursuing a career as an actor and living a very bohemian and wild life among the artists of downtown New York City in the 80s and 90s. I was far too occupied to be bothered with committing to any kind of spiritual path, and far too occupied with me, myself, and I, as I would later come to see. And I won't lie to you, I had a lot of fun during this period of my life. But as the 20th century wound down, and I escaped my roaring 20s, still alive and relatively intact, I found myself married with 2 children, one on the way. I found myself working as an actor on a new show for cable television that was about mafiosi in New Jersey. And to my surprise, and the surprise of many involved, the show was an instant hit. And suddenly, overnight, after 15 years, I was famous, making decent money, doing fulfilling work on a wonderfully written show material, and I had a beautiful family, a great group of friends. Things were fabulous. Everything I'd worked for and wished for so long seemed to have come to fruition. But in my mind, deep inside, I knew all was not well. Something was rotten in Denmark, or in my case at the time, Hoboken. I was lost somehow, and basically was indulging in very self-destructive behaviors more and more. My tolerance for drugs and alcohol had reached epic proportions, and I was pretty miserable, and a pretty miserable human being in a lot of ways. It seemed that with all the gifts I had been granted, it wasn't enough. I wanted more, whatever that was, whatever that meant, whatever hole I had hoped to fill was still very empty. And in my heart, I knew this. I knew I was walking the wrong road. I knew something was missing, but something very fundamental to my being. And I began to suspect it was something spiritual. So I read a lot. I always did read a lot, but now I really focused on things in the spiritual realm. Actually, my pursuit of this really began more with mysticism, and people like Castaneda and Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, Blavatsky, even Aleister Crowley, believe it or not. You know, the magical and the mystical was something very attractive to me. The more exotic and mysterious, the better. I think I was hoping all my problems could be solved by some act of magic, like saying an incantation or taking peyote or some sorcerer dispelling the demons that were inside my soul, and thus avoid doing the actual work that needed to be done. I also sought help and counsel from a variety of New Age healers, body workers, energy manipulators, third eye and chakra openers, shamans, and psychics. Very famous psychic once came to my home to give me a reading and tripped on the one step that led to my sunken living room. It was over for me right there. I mean, if she was so great, she should have saw that coming, right? And some of these folks were great people and sincere people, and some with insight and some abilities, but none were really able to affect me in any kind of profound way. And around this time, I was given a book written by Jiddu Krishnamurti, and his ideas seemed much more in tune with what I thought I was looking for. And I started to read everything I could find that he wrote, and his words really inspired me. And something was stirring inside somewhere, but eventually I wound up in the same place again, because I would read these things and I would connect to these things and be engrossed while I read them, but I found no daily system on practice that allowed me to integrate these things into my life. So not much was really changing. And then I saw an interview with a man we know as the 14th Dalai Lama. And the only words I remember from the clip I saw was, "My religion is kindness." And those 4 words somehow shot into my brain. It was exactly what I needed to hear at that point in time. And it made complete sense to me. And even more important was, here was a living embodiment of kindness, as well as compassion and love and peace. I mean, these qualities to me just emanated and radiated from this man. And he was with us and is with us now on this planet, alive. So being able to see this living example gave me enormous hope and inspiration. And I turned myself towards his teachings, really. I started reading a lot of the Dalai Lama's books, and it began to be clear that this Tibetan Buddhist path was exactly what I was looking for. I had no problem accepting these ideas. They made a great deal of sense to me. Actually, I felt a lot of it was very scientific. Karma, the law of cause and effect. Every action has a reaction. That's scientific law. But to commit to this path was going to take a lot of work. I mean, to really walk this walk and move away from selfish and egoistic absorption to a more altruistic outlook on life was going to take a lot of work. And I realized I needed to do 2 things. One was meditate, and I resisted doing that as long as I possibly could. And the other was find a teacher. And they say if you seek a teacher, you'll find one when you're ready, or if you put out into the universe a sincere desire to find a true, authentic teacher, your prayers will be answered. Mine happened to be answered in the form of a Tibetan Lama named Garchen Rinpoche. Like the Dalai Lama, Garchen Rinpoche is one of those beings whose every word and gesture is infused with kindness and compassion. I mean, it's real, it's very palpable. I've seen it in action. I see how people are immediately touched by his presence and his sincere motivation to really benefit all beings. Garchen Rinpoche spent 20 years imprisoned by the Chinese occupiers of Tibet in 1959 up until 1979. The heavy labor camp that he was in housed several High Lamas who practiced Buddhism in secret. And Rinpoche says his biggest fear when he was in the prison was not death, but he was afraid of losing his compassion for his captors. And if you met him, you would believe this statement wholeheartedly. One of the Garchen Rinpoche's core teachings is on the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, which is written by the Lama Gulchu Togme Zangpo. Rinpoche passes out a lot of these little yellow books, the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, and wherever he goes all over the world and teaches. And the first one really kind of embodies him for me. Ceaselessly hearing, pondering, and meditating day and night in order to liberate oneself and others from the ocean of cyclic existence is the Bodhisattva's practice. That kind of embodies him in a nutshell. My favorite is number 21. Indulging sense pleasures is like drinking salt water. However much one indulges, thirst and craving only increase. Immediately abandoning whatever things give rise to clinging and attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. That's a good one for me. Yeah. But it's Rinpoche's compassion and wisdom that inspired my wife and I to take refuge with him. And if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like being baptized as a Buddhist. But more importantly, it's about committing to following the teacher and his teachings. And now the real work started, going to teachings and reading text and eventually dreaded meditation. And like I said, I put this off really for many years, and I was really convinced I couldn't do it. I started with like 3 minutes. It was damn near impossible. And very difficult. My mind was very busy and thoughts came all the time, but now it's 7 years later and my mind is still very busy. And it's difficult, but it does make a difference. Looking at your mind, trying to see how it works, trying to see where it fails. I mean, meditation, I think, really can help you work with your own negative emotions. I mean, whereas in the past, anytime somebody would cut me off on the road, I'd blow up all the time, every time. Now, I do it only maybe 8 out of 10 times, So it's progress, not perfection, as they say. And in addition to learning meditation, we were taught the Four Noble Truths, which are the very first teachings of the Buddha, and that's number 1, in life there's suffering. Number 2, the cause of suffering is our negative emotions. Number 3, there's a path that leads away from the suffering. And number 4, suffering can come to an end. This sounded like a great plan. Tame the mind, eliminate the negative emotions, suffering ends, nirvana and enlightenment await. We're on our way, right? Very happy with this plan, but then it got all turned upside down when we were introduced to the concept of the Bodhisattva Vow. Tibetan Buddhists take this vow and pledge to remain in samsara, worldly existence, and be reborn again and again to help others on the path. Bodhisattva vows to not leave samsara and enter nirvana until all beings reached enlightenment. Now I was not so happy. This seemed like it's going to take a very long time. This is like flying from New York to Miami via Tokyo or something, or Mars. But this is the kind of compassion that Tibetan Buddhism aspires to. It's not for wimps. And this aspiration to be of service and benefit to all beings lies really at the core of the Tibetan Buddhist path, and it's the teachings of this path and their practice that for me really began to affect some real change. Many of the big problems that I discussed kind of sorted them out. I mean, the ones that I was talking about before, and addiction, and I'm a happier person today. I no longer feel that big gaping hole that needs fulfilling. I know what it is I have to do now. I don't always do it, but when I fall, I have a place I know where I should be putting my feet. I'm still a mess like all of us, basically, but I think I'm a kinder mess and a more patient mess, although my kids aren't here to disagree with that and dispute that. The great Tibetan Lama Sogyo Rinpoche, I was at a teaching of his, and he defined compassion as respect. Now that made a very, very big impression on me, as so often I thought of compassion more in line with sympathy and even pity, but respect to me really levels the playing field and expresses a feeling of brotherhood and interconnectedness. So I want to keep learning how to respect. I think that's a very worthy pursuit. So I'll leave you with the words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If you want to be happy, demonstrate compassion. If you want others to be happy, demonstrate compassion. And thank you very much for hearing me today.